Did I just make up a word? I think call it a moderator.
A mitigator.
A mitigator. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know what it was.
With Kansas as the national champions, we do need to talk about mitigating factors. Right?
Yeah, well, I'm going to get there because I do find the how can people not be talking about that? Like, who's talking about right now? Like, we could, but the people that have been
I'm not interested. I don't think that my audience is that interested.
Well, it's not even that.
Hand-wringing is like really worth it.
Right, but it's not even that to me. It's the fact that the tournament has been broadcast by CBS, TNT, and Turner Sports for the last 3.5 weeks, and they have no interest in shaming the NCAA. That's not what they're about. Come on, I support anybody who wants to write, and I've said it. That I wanted Mark Emmert to hand Bill Self the trophy with 6 level 1 violations. Here, you're here, babe. How embarrassing is that going to be? I wanted them to say that, or somebody to write that, yeah, Bill Self's won his second national championship. Of course, this one won't count in 4 years when they remove it, just like they removed Rick Pitino's. But time and place, people. It's just not going to happen. So, but I appreciate people fighting the good fight. All right. You heard the promo coming back, Chip. This run, how do you sum up what we saw? I've tried to find different ways of talking about it. I think this has been an incredible Hubert Davis job performance. He turned his team around, but it's just a testimony to, or a testament. I used the wrong word there. To just how he could appeal, how he can communicate, and get the most out of players who probably lacked, other than Caleb Love, lacked confidence 6 weeks ago.
And I got to take it all the way back to when we thought that North Carolina basketball was going to crumble. Yeah. Remember when the whole team was going to jump into the transfer portal after the loss to Wisconsin? Remember when, we were looking at the Roy Williams retirement as, this was just going to be a massive crater. Mm-hmm. And that means it took Hubert Davis and personal relationships with the players that decided to stick around and recommit to the future of North Carolina basketball into the 2021-22 season. It took personal relationships for him to be able to go out there and identify Brady Manick as somebody that you could bring in after Walker Kessler had decided to leave.
Yep.
I think that he has even spoken throughout the NCAA tournament run about the improvements on the defensive end go back to trust and the players' trust in each other and the players' ability to play together. The interpersonal side, what everybody says with Hubert Davis, right? He's just the nicest guy. He's the most genuine guy.
Incredible.
And everybody would pump up his personality almost to sugarcoat it before trying to undercut his abilities or his projections of what he can be as a coach. And so for him to be able to make adjustments, and we've talked about obviously the guard switch is something that you and I both think was very, very important for both players in terms of what they could be. Mm-hmm. But also, the understanding with that limited bench, with that limited rotation, how to understand foul substitutions, how to be able to manage the ways that having a limited rotation forced him to make different kinds of coaching decisions. I think it was an absolutely phenomenal season for Hubert Davis. And to take a step back, I think that he is the head coach of one of the most significant seasons in North Carolina basketball history. That when all the context is applied of the coaching transition, both in Chapel Hill, but also in Durham,
yep.
And you take into consideration the results that North Carolina got, the fact that North Carolina got not only to the Final Four, but the national championship game with that win against Duke. Gary Parrish on Inside College Basketball, maybe an hour or so after the thing went final, he said, "I think this is one of the greatest seasons in North Carolina basketball history." And I listened to it and I was like, okay, and it knocked it around my head for a little bit. And we can debate where it ranks on greatest, but you can't argue the significance of the way the season ended and what it means for Hubert Davis and what it means for sort of the 5-year, 10-year outlook for North Carolina basketball.
Yeah, look, when Bill Guthridge took over, I mean, they had legitimate stars.
They had the National Player of the Year.
I mean, you had Carter, you had James. I mean, they had a great team. This was not that. And I do think that there were times this year, and look, we tend to play revisionist history. Well, this is always the team we thought it could be. No. you had to be like pie in the sky or high to think that this was always the team it could be based on what we'd seen, because against every good team they played, they just got worked. Mm-hmm. Every good team they played, just the except for Michigan. And I think there was reason to believe that Michigan wasn't all that good. They rallied and got in the tournament and even won a game, or maybe 2 games, but they were not that great. But he just has a way, and I try never to diminish his ability as a coach, because I think he's an excellent basketball coach. You can't play for the coaches he played for in the NBA and be as cerebral a player as he was without being able to process all that information and translate it to your players. I think he's very good at that. But I think the best thing he did this year was just be the positive. He was Mr. Positive Vibe. The only time he was ever down on them as players was after the Wake game, and I think he realized that they needed a dose of honesty in that, look, they got outclassed by better players in that game. I still don't know how many pros he's got, but boy, they played just so great not the last 6 weeks, but from the Duke win at Cameron on. I mean, they were legitimately good, and they had the ball with 1:41 left and a chance to win against a much better team.
I do not want to speak for another company's decisions, but if Jimmy Seafood, IP3s, everybody else can back up the truck,
right,
you might have one of the 5 best teams in college basketball going into next season. You know, the way too early top 25s, or the way too early top 25 and 1 as it stands at CBSSports.com, that ranking has UNC at number 2.
Well, does Manick have another year?
Manick and Colin Gillespie are the only 2 players in all of college basketball that can't come back if they want.
They can't.
Can't.
We're done with Brady Manick.
Yeah, Brady Manick and Colin Gillespie for Villanova already have used the COVID year.
Okay.
Now, pretty much everyone else, if they want to come back, could come back. That means that, and you mentioned the 98 team. The 98 team had the National Player of the Year in Antoine Jamison, and I can't remember, and an all-ACC player in Vince Carter.
And Shammond Williams and Adamola Okalaja and Matt Darjai and Ed Cota.
Yeah, this team has one third-team All-American. 98 had the National Player of the Year.
Right.
This team has one third-team All-American. That's Armando Bacot. If Bacot's back, if Love's back, if RJ Davis is back, I think that even Leakey could use a COVID year if he wanted to return and continue to be one of the best defenders, not only in the ACC, but maybe even extend that argument to comparing him against the best in the country. Then, yeah, North Carolina will start next year. And that was something else that stood out to me, because if you were concerned about the future of North Carolina basketball under Hubert Davis, like, what are the expectations for North Carolina basketball nationally? That every single year, North Carolina's on that list of 10 or 12 teams you got to watch out for. And to see North Carolina in a way too early preseason ranking at number 2, like, well, that is continuing the foundation of expectations of North Carolina basketball.
Let me ask you this. Chip Patterson is here every Wednesday. What Hubert Davis did, does it impact the amount of pressure that is now on Jon Scheyer at Duke?
100%. And I think that it puts unfairly a lot of pressure on how Duke performs in the NCAA tournament, because that will be that kind of, when things got shaky and everyone got not uncomfortable, but everyone got uncertain about whether Duke was as dominant. It was during that run that included the VCU loss. It was during that run that included falling to Arizona. It was these NCAA tournament defeats along the way that, really started to not reflect how good those teams were, how dominant those teams were against ACC competition. Because I think as long as Jon Scheyer is the head coach at Duke, they're going to have some of the best recruiting classes in the country. They're going to have talent that is going to rank up with anybody else in the entire country. I think they're going to be a program under Jon Scheyer that just stacks wins, 25 to 30 wins regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I do not think there will be a down year, but don't let early exits from the NCAA tournament become a nagging theme, because especially compared to what Hubert Davis just did with an 8 seed, running it all the way to the national championship game, that is going to look like a shortcoming compared to your Tobacco Road rival.
All right, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because I think the answer is it doesn't impact it at all, because it was already there.
Okay.
Because that's what
question.
Right. It's right. It was sort of a trick, because based on, look, not that it's fair to always be compared to the guy you're following, but the guy won 5. He's got more than 100 NCAA tournament wins. I mean, they're
13 Final Fours.
I mean, it's insane. So I've said, if he does, essentially, in terms of NCAA tournament performance, if he does 20% of what his boss just did in his career, then he's a huge success. 20% of what the guy was before him did. So look, I think the pressure on him is enormous, or it's nothing, depending on how he embraces that pressure anyway. I don't think there's an impact of Hubert, but I do think there is a huge amount of pressure on him, and it will all be manifested by how they do in the NCAA tournament. And one final thing on this particular topic is, at some point, does Duke, if we look at history, and we've basically been about a dozen years in this one-and-done era, and there are 2 teams that have won titles with primarily freshman-laden teams. Just 2. 2012 Kentucky, 2015 Duke. All the other teams that won had tons of veterans on the team. Obviously, Kansas had a bunch of veterans, and Carolina played them, but Baylor a year ago, Virginia, Villanova, North Carolina, Villanova, those are all senior-laden teams, sprinkled some sophomores in there, but for the most part, they were all vets. At some point, doesn't Jon need, and all these schools who do it, don't they need guys who are going to be around 3 years, even 4 years, to kind of be the driving force?
The thing that is shaken me was that one of the big selling points of Kentucky this year was that it wasn't a one-and-done team.
Right.
That it was a team of transfers. It was a team of program guys like Keon Brooks, Davion Mintz, of course, Oscar Tshiebwe, the National Player of the Year from West Virginia, Xavier Wheeler at guard coming in from Georgia. And then Ty Washington was your traditional, Kentucky 5-star freshman that we're used to seeing out there. Kellen Grady coming in from Davidson. You looked at it, you're like, now that John Calipari has this experience and talent, and experienced talent, this is going to be the Kentucky team that can be able to go on a very deep run in the NCAA tournament, because that's what was missing with the one-and-done teams.
Right.
And then they lost to St. Peter's.
Yeah, but but here's the thing. That happens. It happens to great teams. You just take your eye off the ball for 1 second, and all of a sudden you get St. Petered. And I mean, that's
but the idea was that the experience would help you avoid getting I'm bouncing back and forth on this one, because I don't think that you need experience. I mean, Kansas had experience. Kansas had 4 seniors and a junior in its 5-man rotation with just 2 sophomores rounding it out. One of them's Taylon Wilson, who's been playing every second since he got to Kansas as a freshman.
Right.
Like I am with you that when I make my personal predictions and picks, I do look for the teams that have the experience and the way that guys stick around and build up to a point where you can break through and win a national championship. I do think that that's the case. Duke rebooting every single year does not give themselves the best odds for that based on the evidence of who wins national championships in the one-and-done era. But I also don't think that having an experienced group doesn't automatically mean that you've got an advantage over a team that has more talent.
I just think that over time, I think it's been proven that the experienced teams, like I think freshman teams can get to a Final Four, but man, it is just hard to do this against other teams who have not the same talent, but similar enough talent, but also have kind of an understand. Like the biggest problem for me with the Duke teams has been the inability to defend. And it takes time to really learn how to defend at the college level. I think these guys aren't necessarily told to play defense or taught to play defense in high school because they don't have to. But it is interesting.
Is that because the old way of playing defense got outruled by all the
yeah, probably.
Like the way Duke used to just get up in you a little bit, now all of a sudden they can't do it quite as much. Well, so why not? Just sit back, let the other team have their position, stay in front of them, and then we'll go outscore them on the other end.
That's fair. Real quick on this before Dennis is giving me the sign, like it's time to go.
He hasn't been around for a lot of these conversations.
I understand.
And we're the clock.
And we're going to talk Masters gambling on the other side. In 2015 or 14, the fall of that season, I was reading the scouting report on Justice Winslow, and he was like the 8th ranked recruit in the country that year. And the scouting report didn't ever mention jump shot, elite can drive. It like intensity, defense, glue guy. I'm like, how do you get to be a top 10 high school basketball recruit and nobody is talking about your skills as a basketball player? That's the type of player, right? I mean, honestly, Justice Winslow was like a hockey player who could also play basketball. He was that kind of a guy. He's the guy that gets in front of the goal and just he scores greasy goals, and he's not afraid to be a little chippy, and he was. We all know that. It almost seems like Derek Whitehead has a little bit of that in him based on everything that I have read. So if you're a Duke fan and you want to kind of read into it, that's the kind of player that you need, I think, to kind of help you get over the hump. And Duke had a lot of really good players. I don't think they had anybody quite like that.